We are ready for Joshua chapter 2. Joshua chapter 2 is where we're ready for. Jay was asking about Blount County or which one it is. When we tried out here, we also tried out at the Eastside congregation in Maryville. And we got a lesson on that. And we determined, or actually they determined for us, that it depends on what part of the state you live in, what you call it. So they may be right. But anyway, what do we need to know tonight? We began last week in Joshua chapter 1. Here's my plan. Tonight we're going to do Joshua chapter 2. Did Joshua 1 last week, did Joshua 2 this week. We will do Joshua chapter 3 and 4 next week, Lord willing. So we'll see how far we get with chapter 2. But Joshua chapter 2. Joshua chapter 1 basically he got the commission, if you will. He got we could say he got committed, but that wouldn't be right. He got the commission from God to go and to basically take over the land. Here's a land that I'm going to give you. You go take it over. Remember now, the children of Israel have been wandering in the wilderness. And they had now are at the edge of, if you will, the land that God had promised. They'd been in Egyptian bondage 430 years, been wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. Now here they are. They're very close. They're able, not literally, but almost literally, but they are proverbially. They're right at the Jordan River. They're on the east side of the Jordan River, almost able to see over into the land, but not yet. And it is now, according to Joshua chapter 2, that Joshua, the son of Nun, sent out 2 men from Ai or Shittim to spy secretly, saying, "Go view the land, especially Jericho." It seems to be that what we can gather both from history and also from a couple of statements in the book of Deuteronomy, that the cities, at least in Israel at this point in time, were city-states. In other words, they were governed by a king, and they were sort of independent of each other. And so they are told, these 2 spies are told to go to a land and view out, especially Jericho, view out the land, but especially Jericho. Different, if you will, than Joshua and Caleb. Joshua and Caleb is part of that duo. Joshua is part of that duo that we preached on Sunday morning. We talked about Caleb on Sunday morning, but Joshua was the other one of the 12 spies that came back. He and Caleb were the 2 that came back and said, "We can take it." And Joshua, though, spins out 2. Well, why 2? Why not 12 like they did before? Well, it seems like the area in which they're going to, the commission, if you will, that Joshua had given them is much smaller in scope, didn't need to go all over everywhere like Joshua and Caleb and the other 10 spies were sent by Moses. And so just 2 were needed. But they go to Jericho. Jericho is just right over, if you will, not far over the Jordan River from where they are. And so they went to the house of a harlot named Rahab and lodged there. A harlot. The Hebrew word can mean 2 things. It can mean, first of all, it can mean a prostitute. It can also mean one who keeps an inn. The Hebrew word can. And there are, if you pick up religious books, commentaries, and you read them, you will say, well, this guy says that she was maybe just a keeper of an inn, or this one might say, well, she was a prostitute. Well, which is it? Well, when she's referred to in the New Testament, when she's referred to as a harlot in the New Testament, the Greek word that's used means prostitute. And so, more than likely, she was a prostitute. Rahab, though, the house from which they went to. Rahab is a lady that, even though she is, or it is said that she is a harlot, a prostitute, Rahab is a lady that evidently, as we'll see in these verses, has faith. She may have been one of a few, one of a very few individuals in Jericho that had faith. There's a great study that was done that I was reading this morning on this that talked about, I believe it was in Doug Parsons' book. I know it was. Doug Parsons wrote a class book on Joshua. And in Doug's book, he makes the statement and talks about how that this was the providence of God to find even this lady. Now, we're going to have some problems with her in this text, and we'll talk about that when we get there. But nevertheless, they're to go and lodge in her house. And verse 2 says, and it was told the king of Jericho, saying, behold, men have come here tonight from the children of Israel to search out the country. The king finds out. How? Well, there's spies everywhere. There's folks everywhere wanting to tell some authority. And so the king finds out. The king finds out that these folks have come, these two spies have come, and they're spying out, or they're searching out the country, as is said. And so the king of Jericho sent to Rahab, saying, bring out the men who have come to you, who have entered your house, for they have come to search out all the country. And that's true. That's true. They're going to search out all the country. In chapters 3, 4, and 5, we're going to see Joshua leading the children of Israel, basically, if you will, from east to west. He's going to head west, if you will. He's going to head almost to the coast. He's going to cut the land off. He's going to cut it to a really intelligent military strategy. He cuts the land of Canaan in two, not equal, but he cuts it in two, and there's a north and a south. And the reason he does that is because if he cuts them off, and if he has a wide enough buffer, the north can't help the south, and the south can't help the north when he goes to take over them, which is the land that God had promised that they would overtake. And so the king finds out. And he finds out, though, that they've come to search the country. It's interesting that notice what he says in verse 2. It says, the men have come here tonight. George Cates, in a lecture on Joshua, makes the statement that they came at night, probably because they were trying to get in under the cover of darkness. And yet they are found out, and found out fairly quickly. And so when the king sends word to Rahab, he says, okay, I want you to send out to these men. He says, they've come. He says, they've come to search out the country. But look at verse 4. The woman took the two men and hid them. So she said, yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they were from. And it happened, as the gate was being shut, when it was dark, that the men went out. Where the men went, I do not know. Pursue them quickly, for you may overtake them. Verse 6. Look, it's in parentheses, just making a statement here. But she had brought them up to the roof and hidden them with stalks of flax, which she had laid in order on the roof. Then the men pursued them by the road to the Jordan, to the fords, and as soon as those who pursued them had gone out, they shut the gate. A fortified city, wanting to be sure that those that were coming were not coming to overtake them. And so when the king sends to Rahab, we need the men that came. She does what? She lies. She lies. And for some, this poses a very huge, and it should, ethical problem. Because we know Rahab's mentioned in the New Testament. We know that she is in whose lineage? She's in Jesus' lineage. She is praised for her faith. And it says in Hebrews 11 that she acted by faith. Verse 31. So we've got a problem. Morally, ethically. Problem is, how can this woman be praised and yet lie? And then if you are sitting in a college class somewhere studying this subject, you go off into the tangent. Is it ever all right to do evil? Can a good man ever do evil and be all right? Well, that's a whole different kettle of fish. I don't know that we can come to a conclusion that we're going to all agree on this subject. You can look at it and you can sit in an ethics class and you can look at this dilemma and you can say, okay, a lie is a lie is a lie. And a lie is something that's said in order to deceive with the hopes possibly of gaining an advantage. That's sort of the lawyerish definition of a lie. Well, I said the lawyerish. Yeah. Yeah. Then you look at several things from a biblical standpoint. Proverbs 6. 6 things the Lord hates, yea, 7 are abomination unto him. What's one of them? Lying lips, lying tongue, depending on the version you're using. In Psalm 15, the psalmist begins the psalm by asking a question. That who shall dwell in your tabernacle and who shall live in your holy hill? In other words, who's going to make it to heaven? Verse 2 tells us what? You got to tell the truth, right? Can't be liars. Paul in Ephesians chapter 4 says, put away what? Lying. Speak truth, every man with his neighbor. Got trouble. So, what's our trouble with Rahab? Well, our trouble is she lied. She knew where they were. Joshua tells us that she had actually taken them up onto the roof. And what she did is she laid these sticks, if you will. They're somewhat like flax. It's somewhat like our cane. If you don't know what cane is, so there's some right at the end of Sawyer Brown. There's some right on the other side of the fence at the house. I can take you and we can get some if you want it. Miss Virginia, I don't know. She hadn't been here in a year. She probably won't miss it. But usually in biblical times, it was cut into 2 to 4 foot long sections, and it was dried out. Roofs, remember, were flat, and so a lot of times they were laid out on laid out orderly on the roof in order to dry out, and then they would be stripped and they would be used to make linen. And so it was common to have these strips up on your roof, and she had them up on her roof. She, though, hides these spies, and she lies. From an ethical standpoint, we can't commend her for what she did. But, Brother Paul, she helped God's plan. Yeah. But from an ethical standpoint, we can't commend her. It's sort of like, and it's like if you were to sit in a college ethics class, here's what I know my ethics teacher would bring up. And that is, if we condemn her and condemn her in her lie, then we have to condemn every policeman, whether he's a Christian or not, because they'll often tell lies to those that they are interrogating in order to get the truth out of them. Didn't say it wasn't right. So you have to ask them, what was the intended purpose? But for all. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
always interesting. We seem to talk about this Rahab. I don't discuss it long, but David, who was after God's own heart, committed premeditated murder. And I've never heard anybody talk about that in this context, but I've heard this one several times. I like it. It bothers me because we're going to talk about medical dilemma. Why would we talk about lying when we could be talking about premeditated murder?
Well, sure. Well, and he did. Moses was murdered. Peter killed. Well, Paul did too. Paul killed Christians. I mean, it's. No, well, he did. He held the coats of those who stoned Stephen.
Premeditated murder. That's why we have an ethical problem with this and not with David.
That's why we want to talk about this.
That's exactly right, but we want to find something that we can say, yeah, I've done this, I've done it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Now, he didn't tell the truth either. I mean, that's what this point in life is.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can line up several. I think that's the beauty of. Oh, we can't go there. That's. Oh, but therein, you know, when we consider that, that's the beauty. To me, that's the beauty of the Bible. Beauty of the Bible is that there are folks that are considered faithful but yet flawed, and yeah, because reality of it is we're called to faithfulness, but if you stop and think about it, we're not called to be flawless. We're called to be faithful. We cannot, in all good conscience, commend Rahab for what she did. We would say it's a lie. The Bible does not commend her for lying, right? But she is important in that, A, her faith will allow her to take these men in. Her faith will allow her the courage to stand up against the king. Her faith will do several things, and we'll note here a few more things. And hid them, yeah. Her faith will cause her to protect her family. Her faith will cause her to make a covenant here in the last part of the chapter. Well, actually, the middle part of the chapter. The fact is that while we can't commend her in her lie, we can commend her in her faith. And when you look at all of us, and we can't use this as an excuse, it's just reality. We're all flawed. We've all made mistakes, and God won't commend us in those things. But then in that walk of faith that we have practiced, God will commend us for. And, sure, yeah. So.
Never lived to me because, I mean, I can't imagine if she would have given them up, not told a lie, and the difficult story would have been that they were slaughtered, right? Or forget, just come up with your own. You know, if somebody comes to your house and says, "Where's your son? Where's your daughter?" Yeah, I mean, I know it's kind of a joke. I don't mean to be flippant, but you get to heaven, God said, "What? You told them where your son was and they killed him, and you knew they were going to kill him, but you thought telling them a lie was less bad than being an accomplice in murder." No, I can't believe, because it doesn't seem consistent with the record. I know it's a phone, but it doesn't seem consistent.
Some books different than Bible, Steve.
Presentation talk about since I was a teen.
Let me ask you this. Go to Hebrews 11. It says there, faith, my faith. Prostitute Rahab, because she walked with spies, was not killed for obedience. So there it is talking about faith. But over in James, it talks about her in chapter 2, and to
25 and
25. Same way, was not even Rahab the prostitute considered righteous
uh-huh.
for what she did when she gave lodging to the spies and sent them all in a different direction. So there she is being commended for life.
No. She's being commended for lodging them. But she sent them off in a different direction. It doesn't commend her for her lie. It commends her for her hospitality and for the fact that she took care of them by sending them in an opposite direction than she basically sent, sort of like that old country song where, now what is the song where the hound dog is sent one way, and I don't know. Thank you. That's it. That's it. That's the one I'm thinking about.
Jesus said to the woman making an adult, he said, "Where's your husband?" "I don't have a husband."
Yeah.
And he said,
Right. There's the key. Don't sin anymore. He didn't say it wasn't a sin. He said, don't sin anymore. And so we're not condoning this lady. But we're saying that she did lie. And we need to just we need to understand what's being said, because there are those. I mean, I've had conversations with individuals that will say, well, it's all right to lie because Rahab lied. I wouldn't tell people that when I'm studying with them. Well, that's
Somebody, running from somebody, a bad person, came to my house. I said, "Here, look at this closet right here. They're right behind me. They're coming driveway." Came up to my driveway with the gun and said, "Where it is, on a set." I'll do it every day. And you'll never be able to convince me that would send you there. Never be able to convince me of that. Because if I said she's right there and I know they're going to kill her, that makes me an accomplice for murder. And we don't believe in relative sin, but I mean, if you take that position, it's like you're things insane.
well, like I say, it goes back to the policeman. Have to, oh yeah, I've sat and debated that one, both pro and con, just from the standpoint.
First thing you do is you don't answer a single question. You say one thing and say it over and over. I want to see an attorney.
Yeah.
And he was a policeman.
Oh yeah.
He didn't really trust policemen, especially when they're asking questions.
No. Yeah.
And they'll lie to you.
Yeah. Very true. Very true. Anything else? So we have the courage, the faith of courage. Now we have a confident faith, if you will. Now, before they lay down, she came up to them on the roof and she said to the men, "I know the Lord has given you the land, that the terror of you has fallen on us, and all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of you." She's already proclaiming victory to the children of Israel. I know the Lord's given you the land. We know that. Well, how did they know that? Well, they probably knew the old law, even though that these were folks that would be considered Gentiles. Some of them, at least, had been taught the law. Probably some had been converted. Probably some had been saying, this land's eventually, the children of Israel eventually going to come back and get this land. And so she says, we know. And she says, the people are faint-hearted. They're weak-kneed because of this. And for we have heard, and notice the two things that she says we've heard. We've heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt. And the second thing is what you did to the two kings of the Amorites who were on the other side of Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. We've heard these things. We've heard about you. We know about you. We know what you've done. We know that your power. We know the power of your God. And not the power of your God, but we know what you've done to others. And so we don't really have a heart to fight you. Why? Because we know that this land has been given to you by God. And so as soon as we heard these things, our heart melted, neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. I want to stop right here because to me, this is a statement of what would seem to be from the most illogical of people. This lady is a prostitute. She's known to be a prostitute. She's known, some have carried it as far as to say, well, maybe she was a madam. Well, it doesn't matter. She's still working in that world, if you will. But here's the statement of faith. She believes God. Now, to what extent? One of the individuals that I was reading today posed an interesting thought. And that is, A, was she still working as a harlot? And B, if she was, where was she in her faith from this standpoint? When we teach someone the truth and when we convert them, they don't always understand everything, right? I'll give you a personal example. I was still in college at the time. I was, I can't remember which year. I think it was in between my junior and senior year of college. And I was sent by the elders for my home congregation, which I was interning for that summer. I was sent with another boy and one of the elders and his wife, and we went out to our mission point in Norton, Kansas. And when we got there, one of the things that the locals told us, we got there on Saturday, met with them for church on Sunday. We had vacation Bible school and a gospel meeting all week long with them. But one of the things they told us on Sunday is they said, you see that man sitting right there, and there was a man sitting in their fellowship room at the end of the table. He was an older gentleman. He hadn't shaved in probably a couple of weeks, and his hair was a little scraggly, and his clothes were not the best, but still fine. But he was sitting at the end of the table. I don't remember his name. They called his name. Yes, we see him. Just want you to know, he was baptized a couple of months ago. He's a new Christian. He's still learning. So if he uses a little profanity around you, don't be alarmed. Don't be alarmed if he asks you something off the wall or if he uses a little profanity. He's still learning. Well, in what I was reading this morning, one individual took off on the idea that made me think about that guy. But he said maybe she had quit, or maybe she just is new in her faith, but she still has faith. She has faith God's going to give you the land, but not only is God going to give you the land, but notice the statement that she's made, because of you, for the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. Now, therefore, she says, I beg you, swear to me by the Lord, since I have shown you kindness, that you also will show kindness to my father's house, and give me a true token, and spare my father, my mother, my brothers, my sisters, and all they that have, and deliver our lives from death. She wants a token. She wants a promise. She wants a pledge. The idea of, as she calls it right there at the end of verse 12, a true token, a true pledge, is something that was common in biblical time. In other words, your word was your bond. But sometimes things would be given or pledges would be made to say, see, I'm going to follow through on my word. I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. And so she wants that. She wants a promise, because she says, I want you to save my family. I've shown you this kindness. I've hid you. I basically sent the folks in a different direction and away from you, and I've let you come into my house, and I've hid you from the king and from his men. He says, so she says, spare my family, my father, my mother, my brothers, my sisters, and all they that have, and deliver our lives from death. I want to guarantee. Jesus, of course, is our guarantee. with regards to our salvation. But there's a lot of similarities between that, and I want to kind of close that out this evening with that thought. So, is there anything anybody wants to say before we move forward? We have the story kind of going. So the men answered her, verse 14, our lives are yours, if none of you tell this business of ours, and it shall be when the Lord has given us the land that we will deal kindly and truly with you. In other words, don't tell what's going on. Just keep it a secret. It's between us. It's private. It's confident. Don't tell anybody. When all of it's done, we'll be sure that we deal kindly with you just like you've dealt with us. Then she let them down by a rope through the window, for her house was on the city wall, and she dwelt on the wall. Now, from a historical and also from an archaeological standpoint, we figured out that the wall was several feet high, and that the walls of Jericho, that there was literally a wall inside a wall, that there was a wall and there was about 10 feet of space, and then there was another wall. She evidently lived on the wall that was on the outside. Her house was somehow configured in the wall. Because let's understand too that when we talk about walls in biblical times, we think of a wall, we think of a 8-inch or 10-inch, concrete block and like that. But you got to understand these were large enough for people to live in. Some of the archaeological finds have found that some of the walls that were around cities were large enough for chariots to drive one way and one drive another. In other words, 2-lane traffic, if you will. And so it was considerable possibility that she lived in the wall, that's where her house was. And so as she lived there, she was able to take these and put them in a basket and lower them down so that they could get away. So she said to them in verse 16, get to the mountain, lest the pursuers meet you. Hide there 3 days until the pursuers have returned. Afterwards, you may go your way. Stay there for 3 days. Why 3 days? Well, she figured that's about as long as those that were searching for them would go out, look for them, find them, or look for them and not find them and come back. And so she says, just go out and stay there. After 3 days, go on. And so the men said to her, we will be blameless of this oath of yours, which you have made us swear, unless when we come to the land, you bind this line of scarlet cord in the window through which you let us down. And unless you bring your father, your mother, your brothers, and all your father's household to your own home, so it shall be that whoever goes outside the doors of your house into the street, his blood shall be on his own head, and we will be guiltless. Whoever is with you in the house, his blood shall be on our head, if a hand is laid on him. And if you tell this business of ours, then we shall be free from your oath, which you've made us swear. So look at the 3 things. Unless when we come to the land, here's what you have to do. You have to have the scarlet cord. Verse 18. Last part of verse 18, unless you bring your father, your mother, your brothers, and your father's household to your own home. And then thirdly, if you tell this business of ours, then we'll be free. Here's the 3 things that have to be met. You see, they didn't just make a pledge, if you will, and say, well, we promise to keep our end of the bargain. They said, you've got to have your end of the bargain as well. You've got to follow through on your side. Here's what we expect of you. Here's what you expect of us. Here's what we expect of you. And so there's an agreement that's made. And then she said in verse 21, according to your words, so be it. And she sent them away, and they departed, and she bound the scarlet cord in the window. So she agreed to the agreement. She was willing to go with it and do with it as they had set out as well. And she already had put the scarlet cord in the window. They departed, went to the mountain, and stayed there 3 days until the pursuers returned. The pursuers sought them all along the way, but did not find them. So the 2 men returned, descended from the mountain, and crossed over. And they came to Joshua, the son of Nun, and told him all that had befallen them. And they said to Joshua, truly the Lord has delivered all the land into our hands, for indeed all the inhabitants of the country are faint-hearted because of us. So they come back. They tell Joshua everything that's happened. They tell Joshua, I'm sure, about Rahab the harlot. They tell them not only about Rahab the harlot, but what she's done, the kindness that she's shown, and the fact that they've made an agreement with her. And so notice then that they said, well, we're ready to go. These people, they're not ready to fight, but we're ready to go. What can we pull? What can we logically make application? Well, one of the great applications I think out of this chapter is the salvation of mankind. The fact that God has made if you will, a covenant with mankind. And mankind has responded with a covenant to God. You might say, well, I didn't make a covenant with God. Well, yeah, you did. You made an agreement with God. When you came to an understanding of the salvation that God is going to offer you, you said, I'll give you my life. And in response, God said, I'll give you salvation. I'll save your soul. If you'll do what I've told you to do, I'll save you. And so the promise was made by God to us. And so therein lies really a great application. Rahab, her family could be saved if they would meet the standards of the agreement. And we already know the story. They met it. And we'll see that as we continue on through this book. We see especially a statement made in the 6th chapter, I believe it is, about verse 25, where it says, Rahab did. Let me get that right. Yes, 6th chapter, verse 25, Joshua spared Rahab the harlot, her father's household, and all that she had. So she dwells in Israel to this day because she hid the messengers whom Joshua sent to spy out Jericho. But we have a covenant that's made. We have a rescue, salvation that's given, if you will. But think about a second application, and that is what faith does. Faith acts. Faith does not sit still. Not we, but a lot of folks have the belief and understanding that faith is just something that you just have. But when you go back to, say, Hebrews chapter 11, and you think about the faith chapter, by faith Noah built an ark. By faith Enoch walked with God. By faith Abraham went into a land that he was promised. All these folks by faith did something. They acted upon their faith. And faith then is not just the accumulation of facts and ideas and saying, well, these are things that I hold to be true. That's part of it. But in saying, I hold these things to be true, I hold the fact that God is, that God was going to take care of me, that God's going to reward me in the end. God says, okay, well, let's see you act upon it. And so Rahab did. Strangely enough, Rahab took these two men in and acted by faith. In fact, that she showed them hospitality. In fact, from the standpoint that she took them in and she hid them from the king. What else might we learn from this chapter or apply from this chapter? Sure.
Rahab, they had been, why over in the 6th chapter, Joshua called her a harlot?
Well, because their argument is because the Hebrew word harlot can mean not only prostitute but innkeeper. But, well, that's an English word. If I threw out the Hebrew word, you wouldn't know what it is. But the argument is settled when we go to the New Testament and we find where Rahab is referred to from the word porneia, which means prostitute or harlot. So the argument, even though made, is mute because of what the New Testament says about her. Yeah. It's the same Hebrew word. Well, it's one of those that it's one of those where when you get to the word, it would be the prerogative of the translator based upon what he believes to choose this or that with regards to the word. But that's true in English. I can't well, and it happens in English, you know. I'm trying to think of an example, Jim. Can't think of one off the top of my head.
English word is completely different.
Sure.
I mean,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can't off the top of my head. But oh yeah. Well, you work in this with translations, but what a translator has to do is he has to be faithful to what is said in the text. But he also has to be faithful in understanding of what's said elsewhere. In other words, if I come and translate the Hebrew text, I'd have to say she was a harlot, a prostitute, because of what I know from the New Testament. Now, you can say, well, that's the way they understood the word, and that's right. So what it is it's Hebrew scholars that want to make Rahab not look as bad because she's in the lineage of Jesus and so forth. But let's don't make her look as bad as really what she is. She was a harlot. Yeah.
And then they go into Rahab's house and bring her out.
Yeah. Yeah. That one we're going to get to. That's I'm lost on that, to be honest. I am too.
so this thing about Jesus, Jesus for a rich man to get to heaven and harder for him than
It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter into heaven. Matthew 12. Well,
like notion that it was translated to camel could be wrong, and it doesn't really change the meaning of anything. If it is rope, you don't stick a rope through the eye of a needle. You know, the same analogy really, but it said the Greek word is spelled exactly the same. It's 3 letter word. And it was originally translated into English as the word camel. That I mean, that I guarantee that's right. It just says it could be the word rope spelled exactly the same. Like I said, there are English words like that.
yes. Yeah, I'm trying to think of an example. I can't right off the top of my head. Oh yeah. Well,
So means something that you attain. It also means something that you shoot a ball into or kick a ball into.
well, the one that keeps coming into my mind now is the word, and this is how it changed. Not how it's different, but how it's changed through time. Is the word gay. Gay. Gay used to mean happy. Still does if you look at it in Webster's dictionary, but through the time it has come to be known as the homosexual community. Now, of course, they don't want to be called gay, and well, LGBTQ plus minus whatever. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
But those rules there, go and tell them, gay.
Yeah. Don't do that. So you do have differences, and you have to pick. And yeah, no, somebody I heard an older preacher when I about college age, and I heard him say gay, and I thought, oh, you probably need to become a little bit more familiar with, not that he was wrong, it's just the way it was used. Timing had changed the word. Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, right now, because of the speed of information, words and their meanings change quickly. And then with regards to a lot of it too, is this woke mentality where I can't offend anybody. Well, I'm going to offend somebody by whatever word I choose. I shared Sunday with some of them. I saw it, I think, either Saturday or Sunday on a news show that there's somewhere, I think it was in France, that some teacher, some professor has come up with the fact that we can't use the article the. In other words, the man, the person, because that's too exclusive. I have, oh yeah. So I don't agree with that. But that's where we're headed as a society because of changing. So yeah, translating it's difficult. It's easier. It's easier for us to translate today than it was, say, well, back when the King James Version was translated. One of the reasons is because we have the text, the Greek text that is used now is different. UBS text, which was used, I know Ken carries the ESV a lot with him. They use the UBS text, the Nestle's text as well, which is older than the UBS text. Helped for the simple reason that before that you had what was called uncials and minuscules, which were basically either capital letters or small letters, but everything, there was no space in between words. And if I carried you through a semester worth of Greek and showed you words, I didn't get into the alphabet and try to teach you everything, but just showed you words and the endings of words and how those endings change, because those endings are past tense, present tense, future tense, singular, plural, and yet that those two letters could be used with this word over here, or they could be used as the beginning of that word over there. And so, but I use a text, UBS text, that has it divided because there's no way I could sit there and no, not all their life. And that's where you get into a lot of arguments over what was it, this word or that word, based upon a word or a letter or two spelling difference.
Not fundamentalist churches that is not unlike that. Very fundamental.
Just depends on what part of Kentucky you go to.
This person had gone on fundamentalist, the Greek scholar.
Yeah.
I know one of the
Ivy League schools, yeah.
he said, after I love this, I've never forgotten. That after all of his study of Greek language, all of these fine points that we're discussing now that we don't even probably can't really understand them, he said his faith was stronger now for him after all of his study than it was when he was in a fundamentalist church being taught that the King James Version of the Bible was the perfect word of God and that every word was perfect. And after he understood how you actually really do translate and how groups of people translate into modern languages, that his faith was stronger in the Word of God after he understood that there's opportunities for pick the wrong word. That's all it really is.
Sure.
There's opportunities to pick the wrong word.
Sure.
And after at that point, he understood the whole impact of the gospel. And he said, my faith is much stronger, and I know that all what would happen through history than it was when I was just being taught that somehow King James Version dropped into English and was perfect. God, those people were inspired.
And the sad thing is, it's not perfect.
No,
but
for us now, it's extremely imperfect because many of the words that are used, we don't even know what they are. I'll give my boss one time, he said something about being fallen into diverse temptations. Someone home did a little work, came back, said, John, that's just the old English spelling of diverse.
Verse varies.
What my preacher says is,
Yeah.
his preacher at a, missionary Baptist church outside of Carthage had a whole nother idea of what divers temptation was.
Those are the temptations you get in the sea, right? Divers.
Yeah, I mean, really. But when you go look at the word,
Yeah.
we see divers temptations and ingredients. And it makes no sense to you, but if you look at the very next, it's like the Revised King James, they spell it with the D and it's verse and go, oh, we don't know what the verse is.
Yeah. It's words change, language change. Always has, always will. Anything else? Let's bow for a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we're thankful for this day, for the blessing of it, for the opportunity that we have this evening to study your word. We're thankful for the great book of Joshua, for really what it shows us, even with regards to learning an insight tonight from Joshua 2 about salvation that you offered to all of us. And we're thankful that you love us and watch over us. We ask that you be with us, bless us, and keep us. Be with those that Jay mentioned in our announcements. Watch over them, bless them, and hold them. We ask that you watch over us and keep us safe. This is our prayer in Christ's name. Amen. Y'all have a great week.